We're live.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Maddie Hahn.
And I'm Stephanie Klotz. And tonight we're going to be talking about stalking. So January is Stalking Awareness Month. And, it's important that we're talking about this because, many of the victims of stalking are intimate partner violence victims. So first, we're going to talk about what is stalking. And I want to go over the kind of legal definition because it is a crime, right? We know this is something that is one of the crimes that are listed for restraining orders, but it's also just a crime in itself. So stalking is a course of conduct, including intimidation, surveillance, or harassment that places a person in reasonable fear of material harm to their health or safety, or the health or safety of an immediate family member, household member, spouse or intimate partner, or pet. And it's a serious crime. We know that this is one of the types of abuse that can really terrorize victims and survivors. So I'm also going to talk a little bit about what stalking looks like. And this can include following you and showing up wherever you are, sending unwanted gifts, letters, cards, and think about gifts. You can kind of be saying like, this person keeps giving me gifts. Someone would be like, what's the big deal with that? It can be a little bit hard to identify, but this idea that it's unwanted, right? And if someone keeps giving me those gifts and doesn't acknowledge my kind of wanting to distance myself from them, that's the difference. It might also include damaging your home, your car, other property. It could be using monitoring your cell phone or other technology, using that to track you. And if you want more information about that, you can listen to our other Facebook Live from November about tech safety. They might drive by the places where you live or work, threaten to hurt you or your family, your friends, or your pets. They might get more information about you via public records, searching online, and any other action that's really meant to control, track, or frighten you. And so that's the key distinction, right? It's that not necessarily just the action, but how it's impacting me that looks at how we're defining stalking.
So when we're talking about stalking statistically, here are some of the numbers. 1 in every 6 US women and 1 in every 19 US men have been stalked in their lifetime. Nearly 3 out of every 4 victims of stalking know their stalkers in some capacity. The most common relationship between the victim and perpetrator is a current or former intimate partner. 66% of female stalking victims were stalked by a current or former intimate partner. People ages 18 to 24 have the highest rate of stalking victimization, and 20% of stalking victims are physically attacked by the stalker. It's so important that we're having this conversation because 1 in 7 stalking victims has been forced to move as a result of their victimization. 1 in 8 stalking victims has reported losing work because of the stalking. Stalking victims suffer much higher rates of depression, anxiety, insomnia, and social dysfunction. And 1 in 4 stalking victims contemplate suicide.
Wow, so definitely has a really serious impact on the victims and survivors. And so before we hear from our special guest tonight about how to create a safety plan, I want to go over just a few tips for friends and family. And I think the most important thing is to listen and believe them, right? A lot of survivors say that it's not necessarily just the act that hurts, but not being believed by friends and family that hurts more. So really, if someone is sharing this with you, think about that definition of stalking. A lot of it is how it's making me feel, right? How it's perceived by me. And so if I'm afraid, if I'm concerned, then believe me. you really want to make sure that you're understanding that you don't know what's best for this person, and you want to be compassionate and try to connect them with resources. And so our Director of Crisis Services, Erica Pilkington, is going to share more about safety planning, what that means, and tips that everyone can use to stay safe if they are fearful that they are being stalked. And I think she's going to also give us some information on just safety planning in general. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Erica.
Hey everyone, and welcome to our discussion on stalking and safety planning. My name is Erica Pilkington, and I'm the Director of Crisis Services at JBWS. Thank you so much for joining us. Like I said, tonight we're going to be talking a little bit about stalking and safety planning. Stalking is one of the most high-risk behaviors associated with domestic violence. It has a high correlation with lethality rates for women specifically who are experiencing domestic violence. According to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 76% of women murdered by an intimate partner were stalked first, and 85% of women who survived murder attempts were stalked. So this is high correlation. Like I had said, stalking is highly correlated with lethality in domestic violence situations. Again, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 89% of femicide victims who had been physically assaulted before their murder were also stalked in that last year prior to their murder. So these are behaviors that are very high risk. And so one of the ways in which we are working with people who are experiencing domestic violence is safety planning. And so what does that phrase mean when we say safety planning? So at its foundation, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's exactly what the words are. We're planning, helping someone plan for their safety. And this can be sort of regardless of what the status of that person's relationship is, we are safety planning with them. So that means if they are in their relationship and have no plans on leaving, if they're in their relationship and contemplating leaving, if they're right in the process of leaving, or they have already left, we are safety planning with them. So what does that mean? Well, that kind of leads into our next topic or question, which is, what are some strategies to safety plan? Now, there are many, but at its core, safety planning should be driven by the person who is experiencing the abuse because they're the expert in their situation. And chances are they're doing a lot already that they don't even know that they're doing that has kept them safe for the most part up until that point. So our advocates and our counselors, we also hear, finances. Money is a big thing that can impact someone's safety because it keeps them in the relationship. So how can we help them to consider what means they may have, or how they may be able to, start to put some money aside so that they have a safety net. So all of those things are components, but certainly are not the only things that we are considering or the only things that are going to keep somebody safe, because we realize that some people may not be able to make a safety net of, some extra money or be able to access their documents. So, we are maneuvering some of those things based on the feedback that we're getting from the person in the conversation when we're talking about their safety. We also talk about physical safety, the layout of the person's home if they're living together. Do things tend to escalate in the car? Do things tend to escalate around drug or alcohol use? So planning for certain situations, planning for physical layouts, there's a lot that goes into these conversations, and it's really driven by the information that the person who's experiencing the abuse is sharing with us. So those are all components that we will talk about in all of our services. So I probably should have mentioned earlier that all of our services have safety planning as a foundational component to them. So that means from our helpline all the way to our safe house, to our legal advocacy, our adult and children's counseling, our family justice center, all of our programming, our Jersey Center for Nonviolence, consists of safety planning at its foundation. So that is something that we are not only just talking about at their intake point or at their first helpline call, we're reassessing all the way through their process and all the way through their their connection with JBWS services. We have people who are connected with JBWS services for a very short term, couple of weeks, a month, all the way till, a couple of years. So we are always reassessing someone's safety needs when they're involved in our programming. Another thing that we wanted to kind of talk about as it relates to stalking and safety planning specifically are some strategies that someone can use to stay safe if they're being stalked. So one of the pieces that we encourage individuals who are experiencing abuse to be thinking about is, how does the person who's stalking you or perpetrating the abuse, what information is it that they have, right? So are they showing up to places that they already know about, right? So places like if you work outside the home, are they showing up at your job? Places that you frequent often, which might be, the gym or, a hair salon or friends or family's homes, right? Are those places that they already know about because of the relationship and the nature of the relationship? And so they are going to those commonly, assumed places that you might be. Or do they have access to information and you don't know how they have access to that information? So, for example, have you switched up some of the places that you are going to and you're picking new places and they're still, showing up at those places? So in those situations, we're encouraging people to consider, okay, how could this person have that information? We see technology being a big point of how someone is accessing information about their partner or about their ex-partner. iPhones and smartphones have so many ways of tracking people. And so it can be very basic around certain apps, right? Do you have a shared plan? There's lots of family tracking apps that have meant to be helpful to monitor children. Things like Find My Friends, and there's lots of different family tracking apps. And oftentimes people who are perpetrating abuse and stalking behaviors will use those apps to monitor their partners, as opposed to, what those apps were created for, which is to, help monitor children, basically, and safety around children. So that is a big piece that we talk with our clients about, is look at your location services, look at your apps, make sure you go in and, are there apps on your phone that you're unfamiliar with? You don't know how they got there. You didn't download them. Changing up your passwords, or just thinking about, do you share passwords with your partner? Does your partner or ex-partner have access to those things? Another thought is, it only takes one time potentially to have access to your phone to be able to install spyware that then the person could be accessing remotely via another device that can track your whereabouts or your loved one's whereabouts. So you don't necessarily have to have access to the phone all the time to do that. Like I said, there are apps and spyware that can be downloaded onto your phone just by having access once, and then that gives them, regular access to your phone and to your location services and emails and phone calls, as well as shared family plans. We know that most people who are on a plan with a partner, a spouse, they have a shared family plan. So just by having access to that, right, it gives them a lot of information about the numbers that you're calling, the numbers that you're texting, et cetera. So really considering technology as a huge umbrella for how people can be, how partners or ex-partners can be accessing information about your whereabouts. So, like I mentioned before, the two main things that we're talking with our clients about are your commonly visited places and also technology. Now, those aren't the only two strategies and the only two areas that we talk with our clients about as it relates to stalking, but they are two big catch-alls that oftentimes we can start to develop a plan from there, and we can start to eliminate some ways in which this person could have information just by talking about those two areas and really narrowing down, yes, okay, this person has access to phone, email, apps, we share apps, right? That's going to give that person potentially a lot of information. So then from that point, we are kind of walking hand in hand with the person who's experiencing the abuse to try to figure out, okay, is it safe for you at this point? Have you left the relationship, and are you somewhere safe where you feel like you can, get a new cell phone plan, or you can turn your location services off? Some people who are experiencing abuse and stalking will talk about, once I do that, my partner's going to know that I know. So I have to be very strategic about when I do that. I can't just turn my location services off unless I am going to kind of, take that step to leave today in that moment if I turn my location services off. So again, it goes back to the person who's in that relationship or the person who's connected to the person who's using abuse. They are the expert. So just because we use and talk about commonly used strategies does not mean it's going to work for everyone. We cannot stress that enough. We want to help this person make a tailored plan that's driven by them as the person who's experiencing the abuse, the stalking. We want to just help to guide them, but they need to be the expert in that situation because there is no one size fits all, unfortunately. Again, we talk about tips, we talk about strategies, but we do not have, a paper plan that we give out to every one of our clients that says this is how you stay safe from stalking or this is how you stay safe from an abusive partner. It really is very specific, and it is very focused on what it is that that person is sharing and what they are comfortable doing or not doing. So like I said, this can start from the moment someone calls the helpline all the way until they enter our safe house, connect with a legal advocate. In any of our programs, we are safety planning regularly. We're assessing risk, using that danger assessment tool like I talked about. And so we are here to help people who are identifying these behaviors in their relationship or have concerns that the behavior that they're experiencing in their relationship may lead to some of the things that I've just talked about tonight. So we are open, willing to be connecting with people, as well as if your loved one is experiencing this and you're not sure how to support them or how to help them, call our helpline, reach out. We will talk with you. Now, it's always going to be most beneficial if we can talk with the person who's experiencing this behavior in that relationship or in that maybe they've newly left that relationship. But we want to be able to offer family and friends support as well, because we know that it's hard to watch a loved one go through this and it's hard to know the right things to say. And we hear so often, right? You got to leave, you got to get out, you have to get out. That's not always the safest choice for someone. Statistically, specifically when a woman leaves an abusive relationship, it's the most unsafe time in that relationship for them. So women are encouraged to leave and leave and leave, but they need to leave when it's the right time for them. And they need to really, if they can, plan for them leaving that relationship, because their risk does go up when they have made that decision to leave the relationship. The last piece that I want to talk about as it relates to safety planning is that we talked a lot, specifically about femicide and about risk associated with women leaving an abusive relationship and women being stalked. However, there are lots of different scenarios that can happen, and domestic violence is not just where a female is being abused and a male is perpetrating abuse. And so one of the things that we have focused a lot on at JBWS over the past couple of years is looking at people who are in LGBTQ plus population, people who are have some sort of disability, people who are in some sort of marginalized population that their partner is identifying vulnerabilities and utilizing that as an opportunity to isolate them more or control them more. Those are additional components that we are safety planning around when someone is identifying those things. For example, if someone is physically disabled, we are going to have to safety plan very specifically. If they're experiencing physical abuse and they're wanting to leave that relationship or they're being stalked, we need to tailor a plan that's very specific, right? Because it may not be that our traditional general strategies for safety planning are going to be adequate in this person's situation. And so we are going to be tailoring a specific plan, talking with them about their support system, talking with them about utilizing the legal system if that's something that they feel comfortable doing, which we do in everyone's situation. But again, really considering each person's unique situation and how some things need additional consideration in order to keep themselves safe and to plan for their potential exit if that's what they're interested in doing. So like I had mentioned earlier, encourage your loved ones to contact us. If you are experiencing these behaviors or feel as though your relationship may be escalating to this point. We want to be able to support you and to help you plan for your safety. Thank you so much for tuning in. We really, really appreciate it and wish you all a really nice evening. Thank you.
Erica, thank you so much for sharing that amazing information. Such an important reminder that a survivor always knows best about their own safety. So thank you everyone for joining us. And we will be on Facebook Live again to talk about more ways that we can help prevent and be informed and make change in our community. So until next time, bye guys.